Now, the government is trying to reassure householders that there'll be no power cuts this winter, despite the UK's tightest energy crunch in 7 years. National Grid has introduced special measures to cope in the event of particularly severe weather. 3 years ago, spare electricity capacity was running at 17%. By last winter, it had fallen to 5%. And this winter, with generator closures and breakdowns, it will be at 4.1%, as our energy correspondent John Moylan reports.
At National Grid's control room in Berkshire, early evening is a critical time. Demand on the network is ramping up as around Britain millions of people return home, turn on the lights and settle in for the night. Over a 90-minute period, the grid has to find the equivalent of 6 or 7 power plants to meet the needs of all those homes. Dealing with this surge in demand every evening is challenging enough. But with the spare capacity on the network set to get even tighter this winter, National Grid is having to go to extraordinary lengths to keep the lights on.
Margins have deteriorated since last year, but they are manageable and well within the security and reliability standards set by government. But we have taken additional measures this year, and we have bought new tools to help us balance the system in even the toughest winter conditions.
Those emergency measures include paying 3 big electricity plants, including Peterhead in Scotland, to provide backup power. Others will be paid to turn off.
If we send it a signal, it will shut down.
With the click of a switch, this firm in Edinburgh can reduce demand on the network.
There it goes. We've actually got most of that power is now off.
It's signed up dozens of firms, like this cold storage business in Essex, that can afford to turn off for short periods of time.
Everyone that works with us is using a resource that they can shut down for a period of time, or a generator that they could turn on for a period of time without disrupting their normal business operations.
Last week's fire at Didcot Power Station in Oxfordshire and other problems at nuclear plants has led to fresh questions over energy security. Today, one business group said that Britain's energy crisis could mean higher prices ahead.
The fact that we're even discussing the possibility of having blackouts this winter is itself an admission of failure. The fact that National Grid is actually proposing to pay companies to stop work just as we're coming out of a recession is no way to run a modern economy.
The government insists that households won't face power cuts this winter, but margins across the network are set to go even lower next year. John Moylan, BBC News.
Well, with me now is Paul Ekins. He's the director of the University College London Institute for Sustainable Resources. People want to know, are the lights likely to go out this winter or not?
Well, no one can say for sure, but my guess would be it's very, very unlikely. Ofgem have given it a 1 in 31 chance, which is about 3%. So that seems to me about right, and so I wouldn't lose any sleep overnight.
Although even raising it, as someone said in that report, the John Moylan's report, that does make people think, actually, how close are we? Maybe we need to think differently about what we're doing about energy in the future.
Well, it's certain that we are closer than we have been in the past. And in some ways that's good news for consumers, because obviously keeping a large capacity margin is relatively expensive. You don't get capacity margins for free. And if in future years we increase the capacity margin beyond 4%, then obviously we as electricity consumers are going to have to pay for that.
But as people in California would know, if you have a low capacity margin, in other words, when demand goes up, you get big problems. They had it in the United States, and we could have it here, couldn't we?
That, of course, is true, and that's why you definitely need to pay for some capacity margin, and I would guess that probably 4% is too low. I would think probably 7 or 8 was much more comfortable, and I imagine we'll be moving towards that in the longer term.
Could we talk a little bit more widely about the future? I mean, we've heard Ed Miliband saying it was very, very popular. We're going to cap energy prices. Does that stop investment? Do you think anything like that, and the public mood about, you know, the big bad energy companies charging too much, many people think, does that keep people from investing in the kind of plant we need in the future 20 years from now?
I doubt it would keep them investing 20 years hence, but if we want investment to come from private companies, we've got to be prepared to pay for it, and we've got to be prepared for them to make a reasonable profit. Private companies are bound to get scared if they're told by politicians that they can't put the prices up when they're not in complete control of all the factors that set those prices. And so while I don't think it's got anything at all to do, the current situation has nothing at all to do what Ed Miliband said, I think that if you're wanting private companies to make large investments, and we've been told we need about 100 billion by 2020 in our electricity system, well, it's as well not to give power companies who have to make those investments the impression that politicians will meddle in the market.
And then they can defer and think about it maybe in a couple of years' time, by which time there may be an energy shortfall sometime in our future. I suppose that's the point I'm trying to get at.
Well, I think if they feel there's going to be an electricity shortfall, then they will invest, because that's how they're going to make money. And undoubtedly, there are investment plans in companies that will come forward if they think that they can make a reasonable profit. What reasonable is, under the current circumstances, of course, is a matter of debate, and the Competition Markets Authority is looking into that.
And just a final thought, in terms of the flexibility of, we've seen various solutions. If the lights are threatening to go out, you can get big companies to cut production and so on, but we don't want that, do we? I mean, in a growing economy, we will have greater demand for energy.
Well, indeed. On the other hand, the companies that enter into this sort of arrangement do so voluntarily, and National Grid pays them to do that. And that may well be a more cost-effective solution for consumers than National Grid keeping extra capacity online for the 2 or 3 weeks a year that we might need it. So one needs to look at these issues of companies could actually benefit from the payments that National Grid makes them, because then if they don't have to switch off over the winter, they've made a bit of extra money when they weren't expecting it.
Professor Ekins, very interesting. Very nice to talk to you. Thanks very much for coming in. Thank you.
Thank you.